Blood on the concrete. That is what Colonel Robert Sterling saw first when he opened his eyes. Not his own blood. Not yet. The young man standing over him was breathing hard, fists still clenched, face twisted between triumph and horror. Around them, 37 Navy SEAL candidates stood frozen in a circle, watching an old man struggle to rise from the training pad where he had just been thrown with enough force to crack ribs. Robert was 68 years old. The kid who put him down was 25. And in approximately 90 seconds, every person on this training ground was going to learn a lesson about the difference between winning a fight and surviving one. But that was the future. First, the past. 5 days earlier, Montana. The Bitterroot Mountains rose against November sky like the spine of some ancient creature half buried in stone. Robert Sterling stood in the center of his ranch, watching a horse that did not trust him yet. 3 years old, chestnut gelding with fire in its blood and fear in its eyes. Testing the lead rope. Always testing. Robert let the animal pull, then gave slack at exactly the right moment. The horse settled, confused. Humans in its experience either dominated or surrendered. Robert did neither. He redirected, absorbed, made resistance pointless without making it painful. 73rd horse since retirement, each one teaching the same lesson his SEAL instructors beat into him 50 years ago. You do not win by force, you win by making force irrelevant. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Morning training time was sacred. The phone buzzed again. The horse sensed distraction and pulled hard left. Robert corrected without thinking. 50 years of muscle memory. The phone buzzed a third time. The screen showed a name that made his jaw tighten. Admiral Thomas Keller. They had been brothers once. SEAL Team 2 in Vietnam. Survived things that should have killed them. Thomas went officer track after the war. Climbed ranks through politics and strategy. Robert stayed operational. Made it into the first generation of DevGru when SEAL Team 6 was just a classified rumor. They had not spoken in 14 months. Not since Afghanistan. Not since the mission that killed Robert's son and shattered what remained of his ability to forgive. He answered on the fourth ring. Robert, I need you. Thomas's voice carried weight that had nothing to do with rank. Exhaustion, desperation, something else Robert could not identify. I am retired, Thomas. You made that clear at the funeral. Silence on the line. Long enough that Robert heard wind through Montana pines. Then Thomas spoke again, quieter now. I said things I should not have said. I know that. But this is not about us. This is about the teams, about your son's memory. Do not use Aaron to manipulate me. I am using Aaron's death to save lives. Bud's Class 347 has the highest attrition rate in a decade, 68% washout by week 9. These kids are different from our generation, soft, entitled, tech-dependent. They quit the moment training gets hard. We need someone who can reach them. You have instructors. You have master chiefs with 30 years experience. They are not you. They are not the legend, not the ghost of Firebase Tango, not the founding DevGru operator with 49 confirmed kills before you were 25. Not the man who spent 32 years in naval special warfare and walked away alive when most of us did not. Robert watched the horse test the rope again, searching for weakness in the knot it would never find. I am 68 years old. I take insulin twice daily. My back has more metal than bone. What exactly do you think I can teach children who believe CrossFit makes them warriors? Thomas's response came fast, too fast, like he had been rehearsing it. That is exactly why you are perfect. Show them what age looks like, what injury looks like, what pain looks like when you refuse to let it stop you. Show them that toughness is not about muscle or youth. It is about will, about functioning when your body begs to quit. Who is running the instructor cadre? The pause told Robert everything. He knew what was coming before Thomas spoke. Lieutenant Jackson Keller is senior instructor for this class. My son, assigned 6 months ago after his last deployment. Robert closed his eyes, the mountain air suddenly too thin. The same Lieutenant Keller who led the squad in Afghanistan. The mission where Aaron Sterling died. Yes, Thomas's voice cracked on that single syllable. 50 years of friendship compressed into one word that meant, I am asking you to do the impossible and I know it. You want me to work alongside the man who got my son killed. I want you to teach him what I could not, what I failed to teach him. Decision-making under pressure, knowing when to wait and when to act. The difference between courage and recklessness. He thinks like you did at 27, Robert. Before Firebase Tango. before you learn the lessons that keep operators alive. Robert felt rage building, old and familiar as scar tissue. Your son hesitated in Afghanistan. Aaron died covering that hesitation. Those are facts. What lesson am I supposed to teach? How to live with getting your teammates killed. How to make sure it never happens again. 4 words that carried the weight of 50 years. Firebase Tango in May 1971. Robert, 23 years old and terrified, making the call to extract while Thomas lay bleeding from shrapnel in both legs. Robert carrying him 2 miles through jungle to the LZ while enemy fire chewed up trees around them. The decision that saved Thomas's life and cost 2 other teammates theirs. Robert had lived with that choice for 47 years. The math was simple, save one or save none. But simple did not mean easy. It meant waking up some nights seeing the faces of men who died because he prioritized one life over the mission. If I come back, I do it my way. No lectures, no PowerPoint, no academic theory about combat stress and decision paralysis. Whatever you need. Full contact authorization. No safety protocols beyond basic medical. These recruits think they are tough? Let them try to break a 68-year-old man with metal in his spine. If they can put me down, they graduate with honors. If they cannot, they learn humility. Thomas was quiet. Then, you could get seriously hurt. These kids are strong and they will not hold back. Robert looked at his hands, scarred and trembling. An old man's hands that remembered every pressure point, every joint lock, every way to end a fight that 50 years of training had burned into permanent memory. I have been seriously hurt my whole life, Thomas. This time it means something. This time maybe it saves someone else's son. When do I start? Monday. Week 9. Final phase before graduation. 6 weeks to reduce attrition and teach them what they need to survive. I will cut orders today. Temporary duty as senior combat advisor. Robert exhaled slowly. I need the full after-action report from Afghanistan. Unredacted. Radio logs, helmet footage, everything. If I am training your son, I need to know what really happened. Done. Anything else? Master Chief Raymond Cross. If he is available, I need him assigned as my assistant. Ray retired 18 months ago, but I will ask. If anyone can get him back, it is you. Tell him Robert needs him. That should be enough. Robert ended the call and stood motionless in the November cold. The horse had stopped testing the rope, stood quiet now, having learned that resistance was pointless when the human understood leverage better than you did. Inside the ranch house, Robert walked to the mantel where photographs told a story he tried not to think about. Aaron as a child. Aaron at high school graduation. Aaron at Bud's graduation wearing his trident with pride that made Robert's chest ache. Aaron in Afghanistan, face dusty and exhausted but eyes bright with purpose. The last photo showed 3 people. Robert, his wife Catherine, and Aaron at his SEAL graduation. Catherine smiling despite the cancer already growing in her pancreas. Aaron looking invincible the way 23-year-olds always do. Robert uncomfortable in dress blues covered with ribbons he never talked about. Catherine had been gone 6 years. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed stage 4, 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. Robert retired from Nisabdals the day after they buried her. 62 years old, 32 years of service, more medals than he could wear. A son in the teams, a wife in Arlington. He had moved to Montana because Catherine always wanted to live where mountains blocked out the world. Bought the ranch with life insurance money, started training horses because horses did not judge and did not want war stories and did not care about legends. Aaron had visited twice, once right after Robert moved, once for Christmas 3 years ago. Both visits strained. Aaron wanting to share deployment stories with the only person who might understand. Robert wanting to protect his son from understanding that came with permanent cost. Their last conversation had been an argument about Afghanistan, about Aaron's upcoming deployment to Helmand Province, about high-value target missions in one of the most dangerous regions of a country that had been at war for 20 years. Robert had said, "Be careful." Aaron laughed. "Dad, there is no such thing as careful in our line of work. Just committed or half committed. Half committed gets you killed." Robert tried to explain. Committed means protecting your team, not charging into situations where heroism and suicide look identical until someone dies and strangers decide which word to use. Aaron bristled. "So I am reckless? I do not understand tactics? You are 26 years old and you think invincibility is something you earn. I thought the same thing. Then I spent 30 years learning otherwise. They had not spoken again before Aaron deployed. 4 months later, a Navy chaplain appeared at Robert's Montana door. Lieutenant Aaron Sterling, killed in action during combat operations in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Actions consistent with the highest traditions of naval service. Further details classified. Robert called in favors. Former teammates still in the community. People who owed him from operations that remained classified. He pieced together what really happened. Aaron's squad conducting HVT extraction. Ambushed. Lieutenant Jackson Keller hesitating at critical moment. Aaron disobeying direct orders to establish overwatch from exposed position. Providing covering fire that saved the squad and secured the target. Killed by RPG before he could withdraw. The official report praised Aaron's heroism. Posthumous Purple Heart. Silver Star recommendation still pending. Words on paper that meant Robert woke up alone in a house too quiet and had no one to call when memories became unbearable. He had attended the funeral at Arlington. Full honors, 3-volley salute, flag folded and presented. Admiral Thomas Keller there with his son Jackson in dress uniform, looking like he wanted to disappear into the earth. Robert stood at the grave after mourners left. Jackson approached, tried to speak. Robert walked away without acknowledging him. 14 months of silence between Robert and Thomas. Brothers separated by a decision made in seconds on the other side of the world. Until this morning, until the phone call asking Robert to do the impossible. Train alongside the man he blamed for Aaron's death. Robert pulled out his phone and texted Thomas. Send the Afghanistan AAR and personnel files for Class 347. Academic records, psych evals, performance reports. I want to know who I am working with. Response came immediately, sending everything within the hour. Thank you, Robert. I know what I am asking. Robert did not respond. He walked to his bedroom. In the closet behind civilian clothes he rarely wore was a garment bag untouched for 6 years. He unzipped it slowly. Inside hung his dress blue uniform. Ribbons arranged in perfect order. Navy cross top center, 3 silver stars, 4 purple hearts, bronze star with valor. Rows of colored fabric mapping 32 years across Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan. At the bottom sat his trident, eagle-clutching trident, anchor, flintlock pistol, the badge that marked him as part of a brotherhood transcending rank and time. He lifted it carefully. Metal and meaning compressed into something you wore on a uniform but never explained to anyone who had not earned it. Robert had not planned to wear this again. But if he was going to Coronado, if he was standing before warriors who thought they understood toughness, they needed to see what 3 decades looked like on a uniform before they saw what it looked like on a body. He called the one person whose opinion he trusted above admirals and psychologists and well-meaning friends. Raymond Cross had been his swim buddy in Bud's 1968. They survived Hell Week together, fought in the same Vietnam platoons, stood at each other's weddings and funerals, and accumulated trauma of lives spent serving a nation that mostly forgot them once they took off the uniform. Ray answered, second ring, voice rough from decades of cigars. This better be important, Robert. I was beating my grandson at checkers for the 19th straight time. How old is he now? 7. Kid shows promise. Few more years he might give me a challenge. What do you need? Thomas called. Wants me back at Coronado. Instructor billet. 6 weeks. High attrition class that needs lessons we learned the hard way. Ray was quiet. Then, you calling for me to talk you out of it or because you need backup? Already said yes. Need someone watching my 6. Thomas can get you orders if you are willing. Robert, I am 58. My knees creak like old hinges. My wife finally stopped nagging about retirement. You want me back in uniform babysitting kids who think video games teach tactics? I want you there because I am going to push harder than I have in 10 years. And I need someone who knows when I am being stupid versus committed. You are the only one left who knows the difference. Long silence. Then Ray sighed. Aaron's death still eating at you. Every single day. Thomas's kid is one of the instructors? Yes. Hell, you are not going to teach. You are going for revenge wrapped in a training evolution. Maybe. Or maybe I am making sure no other father gets that chaplain visit. Maybe both can be true. Ray exhaled slowly. When do we leave? Monday morning. I drive. You buy coffee. Deal. But Robert, we do this right. No shortcuts. No grief-making tactical decisions. We teach what we know and come home alive. Catherine would kill us both if we died training other people's kids. Catherine is gone, Ray. She does not get a vote. Then I vote for both of us. We train them, improve them, come home. Agreed? Robert looked at the uniform, the ribbons telling stories of survival and sacrifice, the trident marking him as something between civilian and hero, just a warrior who kept showing up. Agreed. He ended the call and sat on the bed. Outside, the gelding moved in the training pen, having learned its lesson. Tomorrow, new lessons, new tests, the patient accumulation of skills transforming wild animal into something that could carry weight without breaking. Robert understood horses better than people. Horses showed limits honestly. Did not fake strength they lacked, just responded to consistent pressure with consistent adaptation until hard things became easy and impossible became routine. But his training worked the same way. Find the limit. Push past. Find new limit. Repeat until body and mind learned limits were negotiable. That suffering was temporary. That quitting was the only unforgivable sin. Robert had taught hundreds of candidates over 14 years as instructor after Somalia. He could tell in the first week who would make it. Not always the strongest or fastest. The ones who endured discomfort without letting it become crisis. Who stayed cold and wet and exhausted but still functioned. Who understood Hell Week was not about physical challenges, but about discovering whether your internal narrative under stress said continue or stop. The ones who quit had reasons, good reasons. Injuries that might worsen, family emergencies, realization that SEAL life was not right for them. Robert never judged quitters. Training was designed to provide honorable exit if they decided they did not want to pay the price. But the ones who stayed, who rang through Hell Week and dive phase and land warfare and graduated with their trident, those were his brothers, the ones who proved they possessed the fundamental quality no training could create. Refusal to quit when every rational reason said quitting was smart. Aaron had been one of those. Robert watched training reports despite his recusal from direct involvement. Watched his son struggle through surf torture and log PT and endless running that ground candidates to exhaustion. Watched him nearly quit twice. Once during Hell Week when hypothermia started shutting down his body. Once during dive phase when equipment malfunction nearly drowned him. Both times Aaron found something inside. Some stubborn core that overrode the body's demand to stop. Robert had been proud, terrified, but proud. Then Afghanistan, the ambush. The decision Aaron made to disobey orders and establish Overwatch because the mission required it and his squad leader hesitated. The RPG, the flag at Arlington and hollow words about sacrifice and honor, meaning Robert woke alone and ate alone and had no one when memories got too heavy. Now Thomas was asking him to go back, to stand before a new generation, to teach what Aaron learned too late. That courage without judgment was just suicide with better PR. That following orders mattered, but knowing when to break orders was essential. That the line between hero and casualty was often just timing and luck and leader quality. And somewhere in that evolution, Robert would work alongside Jackson Keller, 27-year-old squad leader who hesitated, who survived when Aaron did not, who carried his own guilt and probably saw the same images Robert saw. The moment when everything went wrong. Robert did not know if he could do it, did not know if he could stand in the same room without rage overwhelming judgment, but he had to try, because the alternative was staying in Montana training horses and waiting to die alone in a house full of photographs of people who were gone. Better to go back, use what remained of his body and hard-won wisdom to maybe save someone else's son. Honor Aaron by teaching lessons his death illustrated. Find meaning in suffering by transforming it into prevention. Sunday evening, Robert threw his bag in the truck. Garment bag with dress blues laid carefully in back. Trident pinned to uniform. Ranch hand arranged to care for horses. Message sent to Thomas confirming Monday arrival. He stood outside watching sunset, the gelding resting in the pen corner. Having learned resistance had limits and cooperation opened doors. Mountains glowed orange and purple, air cold enough to see breath. This was his last quiet night for 6 weeks. Tomorrow, California. Monday, the Naval Special Warfare Training Center at Coronado and warriors who thought they understood service. He would show them what 32 years looked like, what Vietnam and Panama and Somalia and classified operations looked like on a body refusing to quit. He would teach that toughness was not avoiding pain but functioning through it. That strength was not domination but adaptation. That warrior quality was not physical capacity, but mental resilience when physical capacity failed. And maybe he would learn whether forgiveness existed for squad leaders who made mistakes costing lives. Whether an old warrior could find peace training the next generation, or whether some wounds were too deep to heal. Robert did not have answers, only questions, and commitment to show up Monday morning and see what happened when an old man with too many scars tried teaching young warriors lessons written in blood 50 years ago. Monday morning, 0530. Robert Sterling drove through the front gate of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado for the first time in 6 years. The Pacific Ocean stretched gray and cold beyond the training compound, the same ocean that had tried to kill him during Hell Week in 1968, the same ocean that trained every SEAL who earned the trident. Master Chief Raymond Cross sat in the passenger seat, 58 years old, gray hair cut military short, face that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. He sipped coffee and watched the base wake up around them. Thomas cleared us for BOQ room, Ray said. Building 7, 2 beds, just like old times. Except we were 22 then and thought we were invincible. Now we are old and know better. Robert parked outside the Special Warfare Center headquarters. They climbed out slowly, both men moving with the careful deliberation of bodies that hurt constantly but refused to show it. Inside, a young petty officer showed them to Admiral Keller's office. Thomas stood when they entered. 66 years old, 4 stars on his collar, hair white and thinning, face lined from decades of impossible decisions. He looked at Robert for a long moment, then offered his hand. Thank you for coming. Robert shook the hand, felt the strength still there despite age. I am not here for you, Thomas. I am here for Aaron, so we understand each other. Understood. Where is your son? Lieutenant Keller is with the class right now. Morning PT. They will be back at 0700 for brief and classroom block. I thought you might want to observe before making contact. Smart. Robert turned to Ray. Let us get unpacked and into working uniform. I want to see what we are dealing with before they see us. At 0645, Robert and Ray stood in the back of the classroom where Bud's class 347 would receive their morning brief. 38 candidates filed in, faces young and hard, bodies lean from weeks of punishment, eyes carrying the wariness of people pushed to their limits and discovering limits were negotiable. Lieutenant Jackson Keller entered last, 27 years old, 6'1", lean and muscular, face that would have been handsome except for the shadows under his eyes and the tight set of his jaw. He wore the trident on his uniform and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had earned it. Robert studied him. This was the man whose decisions cost Aaron his life. The squad leader who hesitated when decisiveness was required. Who survived when better men did not. Jackson moved to the front of the room. Class, seats. The candidates sat with the synchronized discipline of people who had learned that orders were not suggestions. Jackson picked up a roster and began calling names. After each name, the candidate barked present with volume that rattled windows. Halfway through roster, Jackson's eyes found Robert and Ray standing him back. He froze for half a second. Recognition and something else. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Then he continued calling names. When roster finished, Jackson set down the clipboard. Before we begin today's training block, I need to introduce 2 new members of our cadre. Colonel Robert Sterling, call sign Ghost, founding member of DevGru, 32 years Naval Special Warfare, Navy Cross, 3 Silver Stars, 4 Purple Hearts. The legend most of you have heard stories about. He is here as Senior Combat Advisor for the remainder of your training. Robert saw candidates turning in their seats, eyes widening. He knew what they were thinking. The ghost of Firebase Tango, the operator with 49 confirmed kills in Vietnam before 25. The man who survived every war America fought for 3 decades. He also saw Jackson's hand shaking slightly as he continued. And Master Chief Raymond Cross, DevGru Senior Enlisted, 2 Navy Crosses, 5 Silver Stars. The man who pulled more operators out of impossible situations than anyone in the history of the teams. He will be assisting Colonel Sterling. Ray nodded acknowledgement but said nothing. Let the candidates' imaginations fill the silence. Jackson looked at Robert. Sir, would you like to address the class? Robert walked slowly to the front. Let his limp show. The slight hitch in his gait from the shrapnel still embedded in his lumbar spine. Let them see he was old and hurt and human. He stopped beside Jackson and turned to face 38 young warriors who thought they understood toughness. When he spoke, His voice carried the roughness of decades shouting commands over gunfire and wind. I am here for one reason, to show you that everything you think makes you strong means nothing. Your youth, your muscle, your aggression, none of it matters without one thing: adaptive intelligence, the ability to function when your body begs to quit. He paused. Let the words settle. I am 68 years old. I have more metal than bone in my back. I take insulin for diabetes and pills for blood pressure. I limp because of shrapnel from a mortar attack in Vietnam before most of you were born. And despite all that, I guarantee not one person in this room can dominate me in a physical confrontation. A ripple went through the candidates: confusion, skepticism. One kid in the front row smirked. Robert saw it, made note. So here is my offer. Anytime during the next 6 weeks, any of you want to test that claim, you come find me. Full contact, no rules, no safety protocols. You put me down, you get honor graduate, and I will personally write the recommendation. But if you cannot, if a 68-year-old man with all these limitations defeats you, then you learn humility. You learn that warrior quality is not about physical capacity. It is about refusing to accept defeat regardless of what your body tells you. The smirking kid in front raised his hand. Robert pointed at him. Speak. Sir, with respect, that sounds like a losing proposition for you. We are young and strong and trained. You are, no offense, old. Robert smiled. No smile reached his eyes. What is your name, candidate? Recruit Brandon Martinez, sir. Former Division I wrestler, 3-time state champion. Robert walked toward Martinez, stopped directly in front of him. Brandon, how much do you weigh? 185, sir. I weigh 160. You have youth, strength, wrestling experience. I have age, injuries, and 50 years of learning how to make all of that irrelevant. So I will make you a deal, right now, in front of your classmates, you and me, 3 minutes. You put me on my back and keep me there for 5 seconds. You win. I do the same to you. I win. What do you say? Martinez looked around at his classmates, seeing the challenge, the audience, the opportunity to prove something. He stood up. I accept, sir. Robert turned to Jackson. Lieutenant, clear some space. Jackson hesitated. Sir, maybe this is not the best approach to beginning your instruction. These candidates are highly trained and... Now, Lieutenant. Jackson moved furniture to the walls, created a 15-foot circle in the center of the room. Robert removed his blouse. Underneath, his t-shirt clung to a body that was lean and scarred. The candidates could see the puckered bullet wound below his left shoulder, the long surgical scar from his shoulder reconstruction, the visible outline of his spine where metal stabilized vertebrae. Martinez stripped into his t-shirt as well. 185 pounds of muscle and youth and confidence. He bounced on his toes, shook out his arms, getting loose. Robert stood perfectly still, center of the circle, weight distributed evenly, no wasted movement. Ray stepped forward. Rules are simple. 3 minutes. Submission or back to ground for 5 seconds. No strikes to throat or eyes. Everything else is fair game. Shake hands. The 2 men stepped to center. Martinez offered his hand. Robert took it, felt the strength there, the eagerness, then let go and stepped back. Ready, Ray said. Fight. Martinez came in fast, shot for a double leg takedown with excellent technique. Low, explosive. The kind of move that had won him state championships. Robert saw it coming, let him close distance. Then at the last possible moment, shifted his hips and sprawled. His legs shot back, weight distributed perfectly to make Martinez's leverage pointless. Martinez adjusted, drove forward, tried to power through. Robert rode the momentum, used it, spun to the side and let Martinez's own force take him past. Martinez stumbled, caught himself, turned back. 45 seconds gone. Martinez came in again, more cautious now. Hands up, feeling for an opening. Robert stayed center circle, utterly still, not giving away his intentions. Martinez feinted left. Robert did not react. Martinez feinted right. Still nothing. Then Martinez committed to a single leg attempt. Fast and technical. Robert let him grab the leg, then hopped on his free leg once, twice, using the hopping motion to position himself, then dropped his weight straight down while threading his free leg over Martinez's back. The movement was pure jiu-jitsu, 50 years of training compressed into 2 seconds of perfect execution. Martinez found himself face down on the floor with Robert's weight settling onto his back. Robert's arms snaking under Martinez's chin, locking in a rear naked choke with the efficiency of someone who had performed this technique thousands of times. Martinez struggled, strong and young and desperate, but Robert had position, had leverage, had 50 years of understanding that strength mattered far less than mechanical advantage. 15 seconds in the chokehold, Martinez tapped the floor. 3 sharp slaps, the universal sign of submission. Robert released immediately, rolled off, stood slowly, offered his hand to help Martinez up. The young man took it, face red, breathing hard, looking at Robert with new eyes. "I do not understand, sir. How did you—" "Because I have done that exact sequence approximately 12,000 times in 50 years. Your body knows wrestling. My body knows survival. Different skill sets. Both valid. Yours just has less experience." Robert turned to face the rest of the class. Every candidate staring. The smirks gone, replaced by something like respect or fear or the beginning of understanding. That was lesson 1. Physical capacity is temporary. Technical skill is permanent. Your muscles will fail you. Your training will not. Any questions? Silence. Good. Master Chief Cross and I will be observing your training for the next week, learning who you are, what you need. Then we start the real work. Dismissed. The candidates filed out, most glancing back at Robert, a few looking at Martinez with sympathy. The young wrestler sat alone for a moment, then stood and walked over to Robert. "Sir, thank you for the lesson, for not humiliating me." Robert put a hand on his shoulder. "You were not humiliated, son. You tested yourself against someone with more experience, and you learned something. That is what training is for. Now get to your next evolution." Martinez nodded and left. Robert put his blouse back on, buttoned it slowly, his back protesting from the takedown despite perfect technique. Ray appeared at his elbow. "You okay?" "Will be. Give me 10 minutes and some ibuprofen." That was quite the entrance. Needed to establish credibility fast. Now they know I am not here for ceremonial purposes. Jackson approached, face carefully neutral. "Sir, that was impressive, but I need to caution you about physical confrontations with candidates. There are safety protocols and liability concerns that—" Robert cut him off. "Lieutenant, I am here at your father's request to reduce attrition and teach these candidates lessons traditional instruction cannot provide. That requires methods that make administrators uncomfortable. If you have concerns, take them to Admiral Keller. Otherwise, let me do my job." Jackson held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Robert watched him walk away. This was going to be complicated, training candidates while working alongside the man whose decisions killed Aaron. But complicated was not impossible. Robert had done impossible things before. He turned to Ray. "Let us get some coffee and review the personnel files. I want to know who else in this class might need individual attention." They walked across the compound toward the instructor facilities. Behind them, the training day continued. Candidates running the obstacle course. Surf torture in the cold Pacific. Log PT that ground men into exhaustion. The eternal cycle of controlled suffering that forged some men into SEALs and broke others who discovered they did not want to pay the price. Robert had been through that crucible 50 years ago, had spent decades on the other side teaching new candidates the same lessons. Now he was back for one final iteration. 6 weeks to honor Aaron's memory by preventing other fathers from receiving that chaplain visit. 6 weeks to teach Jackson Keller the lessons his father failed to teach him. 6 weeks to discover whether an old warrior could find peace through service or whether some wounds were simply too deep to heal. They reached the instructor building. Inside, Ray poured coffee while Robert spread personnel files across a table. 38 candidates, 38 young warriors who thought they understood what service meant. Robert intended to show them otherwise, to demonstrate that real toughness was not about muscle or youth. It was about functioning when everything hurt, and quitting would be easier, and survival required technical skill rather than physical capacity. He opened the first file, read the psych evaluation, the academic scores, the performance reports, building a mental picture of who this kid was and what he needed to learn. Outside, the Pacific Ocean rolled and crashed against the beach. The same ocean that trained warriors for generations. The same ocean that cared nothing for human definitions of strength or weakness. Just water and gravity doing what they always did, testing everything that entered, drowning what was not prepared, carrying forward what refused to quit. Robert Sterling was prepared. He had refused to quit for 68 years. He was not starting now. The real training was about to begin. Twist 1, the simulation massacre, came 2 days later. Robert stood in the control room overlooking the kill house, the close quarters combat training facility where candidates learn to clear buildings and neutralize threats in tight spaces. Today's evolution was standard. 4-man team, building with multiple rooms, role players acting as enemy combatants and hostages. The goal was to complete the mission with no civilian casualties in minimal time. Lieutenant Jackson Keller was running the evolution. His voice came over the radio, calm and professional. Team Alpha, you are green to breach in 30 seconds. Remember your sector assignments. Smooth is fast, fast is deadly. Questions? No, sir, came the response from the team leader. Recruit Carson Blake, 24 years old, former Army Ranger trying to prove he belonged in naval special warfare. Robert had reviewed his file, high tactical scores, strong leadership potential, but tendency toward overconfidence. Robert leaned toward the microphone that connected him to Jackson in the control booth below. Lieutenant, pause the evolution. Jackson looked up at the observation window, confusion on his face. Sir, we are 30 seconds from breach. The team is ready. I know. Pause it anyway. I am coming down. Robert descended the stairs slowly, his back protesting each step. He entered the control room where Jackson stood, surrounded by monitors showing different angles of the kill house interior. Robert pointed at the screens. Who designed this scenario? I did, sir. Standard 4-room clear. Enemy combatants in rooms 1 and 3. Hostages in room 2. Exfil through room 4. We run this evolution every class. Too predictable. Your candidates can memorize it. They stop thinking and start executing a script. That is not training. That is rehearsal. Jackson's jaw tightened. Sir, this evolution has proven effective for 20 years. It teaches proper room clearing techniques and fire discipline. It teaches them to expect the expected. Robert interrupted. In real operations, the enemy does not follow your script. They adapt. They surprise you. They exploit your assumptions. That is why your squad got ambushed in Afghanistan, because you expected the HVT extraction to go according to plan, and when it did not, you hesitated. The room went silent. Every instructor and role player present could feel the tension. Jackson's face flushed. Sir, with respect, that mission is classified. This is not the appropriate venue for discussing. This is exactly the venue. You are training these candidates using methods that teach them to expect predictability in an unpredictable world. The same assumptions that got my son killed. So I am going to redesign this evolution. Make it teach the right lessons. Robert turned to the senior instructor managing the role players. Chief, how long to modify the scenario? Add 2 additional enemy combatants in unexpected locations. Move the hostages to a different room than briefed. Change the exfil route. The chief glanced at Jackson, then back to Robert. 20 minutes, sir. Do it. Robert turned to Jackson. And Lieutenant, you are dismissed from this evolution. I want you observing from the candidate perspective, not running the controls. I will handle that. Jackson opened his mouth, closed it, then straightened to attention. Yes, sir. He left the control room. Robert could feel his anger. Good. Anger meant engagement, meant Jackson was being forced to confront things he did not want to face. 20 minutes later, the evolution reset. Robert stood at the controls, Ray beside him. The monitors showed Team Alpha stacked outside the breach point, ready to execute what they thought would be a standard 4-room clear. Robert keyed the microphone. Team Alpha, you are green to breach. Execute. The team moved with textbook precision. Explosive breach on the door. Flashbang, dynamic entry, team flowed into room 1, found it empty. Confusion rippled through their movements. Room 1 was supposed to have enemy combatants. They adapted, moved to room 2 where hostages should be, also empty. Now the team leader's voice came over radio, uncertain. Control, we have dry holes in rooms 1 and 2, adjusting to room 3. As they approached room 3, Robert triggered the modification. 2 role players designated as enemy combatants appeared behind them, in a space they had already cleared, firing simulation rounds at their backs. Team Alpha's training took over. They spun, returned fire, neutralized the threats, but the surprise had cost them precious seconds and broken their momentum. They pushed into room 3, found hostages there instead of enemies. had to adjust their aggression, could not just flood the room with firepower, then enemy fire from room 4. The exfil route they expected to be clear was now a shooting gallery. The team tried to adapt, but they were reactive now instead of proactive, operating from a position of surprise and confusion instead of controlled aggression. 2 team members took simulation hits. Their vests lit up red, indicating fatal wounds. The team leader, Carson Blake, was one of them. The remaining 2 team members managed to extract the hostages, but at massive cost, 50% casualties, extended time to completion, and most importantly, the look on their faces when they emerged from the kill house was not triumph. It was shaken confidence. The realization that they had been operating on assumptions that combat had just violated. Robert let them sit with that feeling for 5 minutes, just standing in the staging area, processing what happened. Then he walked out to face them. Team Alpha, gather around. The 4 men formed up. 2 still had red lights on their vests. Dead men walking. The other 2 looked exhausted. What just happened in there? Silence. Then Carson Blake spoke up. Sir, the scenario was different than briefed. We expected enemies and hostages in specific locations. When that proved wrong, we got behind the curve. Why did you expect those specific locations? Because that is how the exercise always runs, sir. Exactly. You memorized a script, executed a rehearsed sequence. When reality violated your expectations, you could not adapt fast enough. 2 of you died. If this was a real operation, 2 families would be getting chaplain visits. 2 flag presentations at Arlington, all because you assumed the enemy would cooperate with your training schedule. Robert paused. Let them feel the weight of that. Carson, what did you learn? Blake swallowed hard. That assumptions are dangerous, sir, that we need to expect the unexpected. Good, but not enough. The real lesson is this. In combat, the enemy gets a vote. They do not care about your plan. They do not care about your training. They care about killing you and surviving. So you cannot operate from scripts. You operate from principles. Room clearing principles do not change based on where the enemy is. They work regardless. But you have to understand the principles, not just memorize the steps. Robert turned to the 2 men marked as dead. You 2, what did you learn? The first one, a kid named Tyler something, spoke quietly. That checking your 6 is not optional, sir. We cleared those rooms and moved forward. Assumed our rear was secure. That assumption killed us. Robert nodded. In Afghanistan 14 months ago, a SEAL squad assumed their primary threat axis was forward. They were wrong. Enemy came from their flank. One operator died establishing overwatch to protect his team from a threat they did not see coming. You know what that operator's last words on radio were? The candidates shook their heads. Check your flank. I have eyes on enemy position, suppressing. Squad leader, move your team. Now. Robert let that hang in the air. That operator was my son, Lieutenant Aaron Sterling. He died because his squad leader assumed the threat picture matched the briefing. When reality proved otherwise, my son adapted, made a decision that saved 6 lives at the cost of his own. I am here to make sure none of you die learning that lesson the way he did. Complete silence. This candidate staring at him with new understanding. This was not abstract training. This was personal. This was a father teaching lessons purchased with his son's life. Robert looked each of them in the eyes. For the rest of your time here, every evolution I design will violate your expectations, will force you to adapt, will punish assumptions and reward flexible thinking. It will be frustrating. It will be exhausting. Some of you will hate me for it. But if it keeps you alive when you graduate and deploy into real combat, then my son's death will have meant something. He turned and walked back toward the control room. Behind him, the candidate stood in stunned silence. Robert did not look back. He had delivered the first real lesson. Now they needed time to process it. Inside the control room, Jackson waited, face unreadable. Robert stopped in front of him. You modified my scenario to make me look bad in front of the candidates. I modified your scenario to teach them the lesson your father asked me to teach. That combat does not follow training scenarios. If you feel bad about that, good. Means you are starting to understand what I am here to do. Jackson's hands clenched into fists, then relaxed. Sir, Aaron was my friend. We went through buds together, deployed together. I think about him every single day. You standing here acting like I do not understand what his death cost. You do not understand. Robert's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute conviction. You understand guilt. You understand loss. But you do not understand that much to a father who spent 32 years in this community, who trained his son to be a SEAL, who taught him every lesson he knew, and then watched him die covering for a squad leader's mistake. Until you bury your child, Lieutenant, you do not understand that cost. So do not tell me what you think about. Robert walked out, left Jackson standing alone in the control room, all surrounded by monitors showing empty rooms where simulated combat had just taught real lessons. Outside, Ray waited. You were hard on him. He needs hard. His father coddled him, made excuses for him, pulled strings to get him this instructor billet instead of letting him face a proper investigation into what happened in Afghanistan. Someone needs to hold him accountable. And that someone is you? I am the only one left who has standing. Aaron is dead. The rest of his squad is deployed or transferred. Jackson's father protects him. So yes, that someone is me. They walked across the compound toward the instructor quarters. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in colors that reminded Robert of tracer fire and burning buildings and every sunset he had watched from forward operating bases in countries that did not want him there. Ray spoke quietly. Robert, be careful. Revenge wrapped in training is still revenge. Do not lose sight of why we are really here. I know why I am here, to honor Aaron by preventing other deaths. If Jackson learns something along the way, that is a bonus. But I am not here for his redemption, Ray. I am here for my son's legacy. They reached their quarters. Inside, Robert lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling. His back ached from the day's activities. His hands trembled slightly from fatigue and stress. He was 68 years old, pretending he was 30, using his body in ways that would cost him later. But cost was familiar. He had been paying costs his entire adult life. What was a little more pain if it meant these candidates learned the lessons that kept them alive? He pulled out his phone, scrolled to the photo he looked at every night. Aaron at age 10, wearing SEAL PT gear too big for his body, face full of determination and joy, believing that if he just tried hard enough, he could be like his father. Robert had tried to talk him out of it, told him the cage, the sacrifices, the permanent damage to body and soul that came with this life. But Aaron had inherited Robert's stubbornness, had enlisted anyway, had earned his trident anyway, had deployed anyway, and had died covering for a squad leader's mistake. Robert closed his eyes. Tomorrow there would be more training, more lessons, more opportunities to transform his grief into something that prevented future grief. It was not much, not compared to what he had lost, but it was what he had left. He fell asleep still in his uniform, dreaming of fire-based tango in Afghanistan and all the places where warriors learned that courage was necessary but not sufficient, that sometimes you did everything right and still lost, that the only unforgivable sin was letting those deaths be meaningless. Robert Sterling intended to give Aaron's death meaning, whatever it cost him. The real training was just beginning. The second week of Robert's training assignment began with rain. Week 10 of Bud's Class 347. 5 weeks remained until graduation. Not the gentle Montana rain that Robert Sterling remembered from his ranch. This was Pacific Ocean rain, cold and relentless. The kind that soaked through clothing in minutes and made every movement feel like pushing through wet concrete. The kind of rain that Bud's instructors loved because it added one more layer of misery to training that was already designed to break the week. Robert stood on the edge of the beach watching 37 candidates emerge from the surf. 0500. Still dark. One recruit had rung the bell the previous night, unable to handle the constant uncertainty Robert introduced. 37 remained. The ocean had tried to kill them for the past hour during surf passage drills. Now they ran toward the compound carrying inflatable boats over their heads. Each boat weighed 200 pounds. Divided among 6 men, that should have been manageable. But after an hour in 40-degree water, after being tumbled by waves and fighting hypothermia, those 200 pounds felt like 2,000. Master Chief Raymond Cross stood beside him. Ray wore a weatherproof jacket and held coffee that steamed in the cold air. He took a sip and grimaced. Tastes like battery acid. That is because it is battery acid. Navy coffee has not improved since 1968. Some traditions should die, Robert. Robert watched the candidates struggle past. Their faces were tight with cold and exhaustion. But none of them had quit. Not yet. This class is tougher than the files suggested. Ray nodded. 68% attrition by week 9 usually means the weak ones self-selected out early. What is left is the stubborn core, the ones who would rather die than ring that bell, which makes our job harder. Stubbornness is not the same as wisdom. These kids think suffering proves something. We need to teach them that surviving suffering is just the entry fee. The real test is making good decisions while suffering. A figure detached from the candidate formation and jogged toward them. Lieutenant Jackson Keller, 27 years old, soaked through despite rain gear. He stopped in front of Robert and saluted. "Sir, the candidates are secured and moving to morning chow. Classroom instruction begins at 0700. Combat medicine and casualty evacuation procedures." Robert returned the salute. "Cancel the classroom block." Jackson blinked water from his eyes. "Sir, the medical training is required curriculum. They need those certifications before they can progress to final phase. They can get certifications later. This morning we are doing something different." "How many candidates in this class have actually treated a real casualty under fire?" Jackson hesitated. "None, sir. This is pre-deployment training. Most have never seen combat." "Exactly. So they are going to learn combat medicine by doing it, not by watching PowerPoint slides about arterial bleeding. Notify the medical staff we need simulation casualties. Gunshot wounds, shrapnel trauma, blast injuries. Make them as realistic as possible. Moulage, fake blood, the works. And I want the scenarios run in the kill house with live fire simulation rounds being shot over their heads while they work." Jackson's jaw tightened. "Sir, that violates safety protocols. Medical training is conducted in controlled environments to prevent additional injuries while candidates are learning basic skills." Robert stepped closer, kept his voice quiet but let the steel show through. "Lieutenant, when my son was dying in Afghanistan, do you think he was in a controlled environment? Do you think the enemy stopped shooting while his teammates tried to save him? Or do you think they kept firing because they understood that casualty evacuation is the most vulnerable moment in any engagement?" Jackson's face went pale. "Sir, I know what happened in Afghanistan. I was there. I tried to save Aaron. I did everything I could." "Did you? Because from where I stand, you hesitated when decision was required. And my son paid the price for that hesitation. Now you are training the next generation of operators using the same sanitized methods that failed to prepare you for reality. That ends today." Robert turned to Ray. "Master Chief, set up the scenario. I want 3 casualties. One with arterial bleed requiring tourniquet. One with sucking chest wound requiring chest seal. One with traumatic amputation requiring pressure dressing and shock management. Candidates will be divided into 3-man teams. They will have 5 minutes to stabilize their casualty and move them to extraction point while under simulated fire. Any team that fails to complete in time, their casualty dies." "Questions?" Ray shook his head. "No, sir. I will coordinate with medical staff." Robert turned back to Jackson. "You will be observing this evolution, Lieutenant, not participating. I want you to watch how these candidates perform under pressure. Then afterward, you and I are going to discuss what you see and what it tells us about how we are training them." Jackson stood rigid. "Yes, sir." He walked away, shoulders tight with anger or shame or both. Robert watched him go and felt no satisfaction. There was no joy in breaking a young officer who was already broken. But sometimes pain was the only teacher that got through. Ray cleared his throat. "You are pushing him hard. He needs to be pushed. His father protected him, got him this instructor billet instead of letting him face proper investigation into that mission. Someone needs to hold him accountable. And that someone is you? I am the only one withstanding. Aaron is dead. The rest of his squad is scattered. Jackson's father runs interference. So yes, Ray, that someone is me." They walked toward the instructor facilities. The rain was letting up slightly. Gray dawn light revealed the training compound in all its Spartan functionality. Obstacle courses, grinder where candidates did endless physical training, the bell mounted on a post where quitters could ring out anytime day or night. 3 times and you were done. 3 times and you could stop suffering and go back to being a normal sailor with a normal life expectancy. Robert had never understood the ones who rang out, not with judgment. He simply could not comprehend the mental process that led from "I am suffering" to "therefore I should quit." His own internal wiring had been different. Suffering was just information, data about current conditions. It had no predictive value about future conditions and no moral weight that demanded response. But he understood now that his wiring was unusual. Most people operated differently. For them, suffering was not just information. It was a demand for action, a call to change circumstances. And when circumstances could not be changed quickly, they changed their own participation. They quit. The ones who made it through buries were the ones who could treat suffering as information without letting it become a command. Who could be cold and wet and exhausted and still function because function did not require comfort. It just required will. An hour later, Robert stood in the kill house observation room watching the first three-man team prepare for their medical scenario. The candidates had been briefed. 3 casualties, 5 minutes, simulated enemy fire. Failure meant death. What they did not know was that Robert had programmed the opposing force AI to be far more aggressive than standard training protocols allowed. The enemy would not fire over their heads to create stress. They would target the candidates, force them to choose between treating casualties and defending themselves, make them experience the impossible calculus of combat medicine. The scenario began. Team 1 entered the first room and found their casualty, a role player covered in fake blood with a severed femoral artery pumping red dye onto the floor. The wound was massive and terrifying, the kind of injury that looked unsurvivable even though it was completely fake. The team leader, a kid named Derek Chen, dropped beside the casualty and immediately reached for the tourniquet on his belt. Good instinct. Stop the bleeding first. But as he worked, the opposing force AI triggered. Simulation rounds snapped through the air inches from his head. The sharp crack of blanks and the sting of marking rounds hitting the walls around them. Derek flinched, ducked, lost his grip on the tourniquet. His teammates returned fire, but their positioning was wrong. They had not established security before beginning treatment. Now they were trying to fight and render aid simultaneously, and doing neither effectively. 30 seconds gone. The casualty was still bleeding. Derek got the tourniquet placed, but his hands were shaking. He fumbled the windlass, dropped it, retrieved it, tightened it incorrectly. The bleeding slowed but did not stop. 1 minute gone. More enemy fire. Closer now. One of Derek's teammates took a marking round to the chest. His vest lit up red. Dead. Now they were down to 2 men, 1 casualty, and 4 minutes remaining. Derek finally got the tourniquet secured properly. The bleeding stopped. He grabbed the casualty under the arms and tried to drag him toward the exit. But the casualty was a 200-pound role player who was not helping. Dead weight. Derek managed 5 feet before his back gave out and he dropped the casualty. 2 minutes gone. His remaining teammate, a recruit named Marcus Webb, left his security position to help with the drag. Together, they moved the casualty toward the door. But now, no one was providing covering fire. The opposing force AI capitalized. Multiple simulation rounds hit both candidates. Red lights. Both dead. The scenario ended. 3 bodies on the floor. 1 casualty who would have bled out. 2 rescuers killed trying to save him. Derek lay on his back, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling, the weight of failure visible on his face. Robert keyed the microphone. Team 1, on your feet. Move to debrief room. The candidates extracted themselves from the scenario and walked like condemned men toward the debrief. Robert met them there along with Ray and Jackson. The 3 candidates sat in metal chairs looking miserable. Robert stood in front of them. What happened? Derek spoke first. Sir, we failed to establish proper security before beginning treatment. When enemy fire came, we were exposed and unable to effectively return fire while rendering aid. We should have had 1 man pulling security while the other 2 worked the casualty. Good analysis. What else? The tourniquet application took too long. I fumbled it. Wasted time that we did not have. Why did you fumble it? Derek looked down at his hands. Because I was scared. The simulation rounds were close and loud and I could not focus. Robert nodded. Fear is normal, expected, useful even. It keeps you alert. But you let fear control your actions instead of informing them. When the rounds started snapping, you flinched. That flinch broke your concentration. Do you know why you flinched? Derek shook his head. Because you have been trained to avoid pain. Every evolution in buds teaches you that suffering is temporary if you just push through. But this scenario taught a different lesson, that sometimes suffering is not temporary. Sometimes people die while you watch, and flinching will not save them. Only competence saves them. Robert turned to Marcus. You left your security position to help with the drag. Why? Marcus met his eyes. Sir, Derek could not move the casualty alone. I made a tactical decision to prioritize extraction over security. And that decision got you both killed. Robert let that sit for a moment. In combat, you will face constant, impossible choices. Do I stay in position or help my teammate? Do I treat the casualty or return fire? Do I prioritize mission or personnel? There are no right answers to these questions, only choices and consequences. But what you can control is your preparation. If Derek had been competent with that tourniquet, he would not have needed your help. If you had both trained more, worked faster, maintained discipline under stress, maybe all of you survive. Maybe. Robert walked to the whiteboard and drew a simple diagram. 3 circles representing the team members. 1 circle representing the casualty. This is the fundamental problem of casualty evacuation under fire. You are now down 1 effective fighter. The casualty cannot contribute. So you are operating at reduced capacity while trying to accomplish an additional task that requires physical effort and mental focus. The enemy knows this. They target your wounded because it creates a dilemma. If you stop to help, they can kill you. If you do not stop to help, your teammate dies and your morale collapses. Either way, he pointed at Derek. So the only solution is to be so technically proficient that treating casualties becomes automatic. Muscle memory. You can place a tourniquet in 30 seconds even while being shot at because you have done it 5,000 times in training. Your hands know what to do even when your brain is screaming. Robert erased the diagram. Team 1, you will repeat this scenario every day for the next week. Different casualties, different wounds, but always under fire, always under pressure. By the end of the week, I expect you to complete it in under 3 minutes with 0 casualties. Questions? Derek raised his hand. Sir, is there any way to train for the fear? For the flinching? Yes. Exposure. You flinch because the stimulus is novel. Simulation rounds are loud and fast, and your brain interprets them as danger. But after you experience them enough times without being actually hurt, your brain learns they are not dangerous. The flinch reflex fades. That is why we repeat this scenario, not to practice the technical skills you already know, but to desensitize you to the stress so you can access those skills under pressure. The 3 candidates left looking slightly less defeated. They had failed, but they understood why. That was progress. Jackson had watched the entire debrief in silence. Now he spoke. Sir, that was effective instruction. But the scenario was far more intense than standard protocols allow. If Admiral Keller sees the footage, there will be questions. Let him question. I am here for 6 weeks. If I get fired after 5, I will have still accomplished more than 6 months of sanitized training would have. These candidates need to experience realistic stress before they deploy into actual combat. Jackson hesitated, then asked the question Robert knew was coming. Is that what happened in Afghanistan? Did my hesitation fail to prepare Aaron for realistic stress? Robert turned to face him fully. Your hesitation did not fail to prepare my son. He was prepared. He knew exactly what needed to be done. He disobeyed your order and established Overwatch because the mission required it and you were not making the decision fast enough. So he made it for you and he died doing your job. The words hit Jackson like physical blows. His face went white. Sir, I have lived with that knowledge every day for 14 months. I see Aaron's face every time I close my eyes. I hear his last radio transmission. I know what I did wrong. You do not need to keep punishing me for it. I am not punishing you. I am teaching you. There is a difference. Punishment is about inflicting pain for its own sake. Teaching is about using pain to create understanding that prevents future pain. You are going to train hundreds of candidates in your career, Jackson. Every one of them needs to learn the lessons you failed to learn before Afghanistan. That is how Aaron's death becomes meaningful. Not through your guilt, through your improved instruction. Jackson stood silent, processing. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need from me, sir? I need you to stop protecting yourself. Stop making excuses. Stop letting your father run interference. Face what happened. Learn from it. Then teach it. That is the only redemption available to you. Jackson left without responding. Robert watched him go and felt the weight of what he was doing, breaking a young officer who was already broken. But sometimes things had to be completely disassembled before they could be rebuilt correctly. Ray appeared at his shoulder. That was brutal. That was necessary. Maybe. But Robert, you are using these candidates to punish Jackson for Aaron's death. That is not teaching. That is revenge, Thrawn. Can it not be both? Can I not honor my son by ensuring no other father loses a son the same way while also holding accountable the man responsible? Ray sighed, I suppose it can. But be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming the person pursuing it. You came here to teach. Do not forget that in your need to make Jackson suffer. Robert did not respond. He walked out of the debrief room and across the compound toward the beach. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray. The ocean rolled and crashed with the same indifference it had shown for millions of years. It did not care about human drama, did not care about fathers and sons and mistakes that could not be undone. He stood at the water's edge and let the cold spray hit his face. Somewhere out there, beneath those gray waves, was the same ocean that had tested him 50 years ago during his own Hell Week, the same ocean that tested every candidate who dreamed of earning the trident. The ocean was honest. It did not pretend to be kind or fair. It simply was, powerful and dangerous and utterly indifferent to human ambition. You either learned to work with it or it killed you. There was no middle ground. Robert understood that honesty, appreciated it even. The ocean never lied about what it was or what it would do. Unlike people who hid their true intentions behind words and politeness in social conventions. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Aaron's photo. The 10-year-old boy in oversized PT gear, face full of determination. Robert had taken that photo the day Aaron told him he wanted to be a SEAL, not because of glory or adventure, but because he wanted to be like his father. Robert had tried to explain that being like him meant carrying permanent scars, meant waking up some nights unable to breathe because the memories were suffocating, meant losing friends and burying brothers and watching marriages fail under the weight of secrets you could never share. Aaron had listened, then said simply, I still want to try. And now he was dead, buried at Arlington beside his mother, 26 years old, a lifetime of potential erased in the time it took an RPG to travel 300 meters. Robert put the phone away and turned back toward the compound. He had work to do, candidates to train, lessons to teach, a son's memory to honor through the prevention of future deaths. The week continued with brutal efficiency. Robert redesigned every training evolution to include the element of surprise. Candidates never knew what to expect. The obstacle course would suddenly include role players shooting simulation rounds. Classroom instruction would be interrupted by simulated emergencies requiring immediate response. Even mealtimes became training opportunities when Robert would designate random candidates as casualties, requiring evacuation to medical facilities. The candidates hated it. Robert could see the resentment building. They had expected final phase to follow predictable patterns. Instead, every moment carried the potential for chaos. They could not relax, could not let their guard down, lived in a constant state of heightened alertness that was exhausting. Good. Combat was exhausting. Better to learn that now. By Thursday of week 2 of Robert's assignment, the attrition rate began to drop. 3 candidates who had been on the edge of quitting found new reserves. Something about the unpredictability made them stubborn, made them determined to prove they could handle whatever Robert threw at them. On Friday, Robert introduced the element that would define the rest of their training. He gathered the 37 candidates in the briefing room. They filed in wary and exhausted, took their seats with the careful movements of people whose bodies hurt constantly. Robert stood at the front beside a covered object the size of a large trunk. For the next 3 weeks, you will be participating in an exercise called Broken Warrior. The concept is simple. Each of you will be randomly assigned a physical limitation that simulates combat injury. Broken arm, leg trauma reducing mobility, vision impairment, hearing loss. You will maintain this limitation for 72 hours while continuing all training evolutions. Your performance will be evaluated not on whether you complete the tasks at full capacity, but on how effectively you adapt your tactics to work within your limitations. He pulled the cover off the trunk. Inside were various medical devices, arm casts, leg braces, eye patches, ear protection that blocked hearing, each one designed to simulate specific injuries without causing actual harm. The candidates stared at the trunk with visible apprehension. Robert continued, "This is the most important training you will receive before deployment, not because physical limitations are common in combat, though they are, but because this exercise teaches you that your effectiveness as an operator is not contained in your body. It is contained in your mind. Your body is just the vehicle. When the vehicle is damaged, the driver must adapt, find new ways to accomplish the mission using whatever capacity remains. He reached into the trunk and pulled out a heavy arm cast. 20 years ago, I watched a SEAL operator lose his dominant arm to an IED blast in Iraq. Traumatic amputation at the shoulder. Career-ending injury by any rational assessment. He spent 8 months in rehabilitation, learned to shoot left-handed, learned to fight one-handed, returned to active duty, and completed 3 more deployments before retiring at full capacity. That operator understood something most people never learn. Disability is just a different set of parameters. Robert set down the cast and picked up a leg brace. 15 years ago in Afghanistan, a close friend took shrapnel to both legs, 47 separate wounds. Doctors said he would never walk without assistance. He spent a year relearning how to move, how to run, how to operate, returned to the teams, and served another 6 years. What kept him going was not physical therapy. It was the understanding that limitations are negotiable if you refuse to accept them as permanent. He put the leg brace back and faced the candidates. Each of you will experience multiple limitations over the next 3 weeks. You will learn to fight one-handed, to navigate obstacles with restricted mobility, to communicate without verbal speech, to operate in complete darkness. And through each limitation, you will discover that your capacity far exceeds what you believe possible. Twist 4, the civilian casualty dilemma. The following Monday brought the evolution that would break some candidates and forge others. Robert had designed a scenario that mirrored the mission in Afghanistan where Aaron died. Not identical, but close enough that the tactical and ethical dilemmas matched. The candidates were divided into 6-man squads. Each squad would conduct a high-value target extraction from a compound, standard direct action mission. But Robert had programmed 3 complications. First, the HVT would be located in a room with multiple civilians, including children. Separating the target from innocents would require time and precision. Second, the squad would be ambushed during extraction from an unexpected angle, not the primary threat axis briefed during mission planning. Third, one squad member would be designated as wounded during the ambush, creating the casualty evacuation dilemma while under fire. The first squad through was led by Carson Blake, 24 years old, former Army Ranger. High tactical scores but tendency toward overconfidence. Robert watched from the control room as Carson's team breached the compound and flowed toward the target building with textbook precision. They entered the target room and found the HVT surrounded by role players designated as civilians. Women and children all screaming and panicking, creating chaos that made target identification difficult. Carson handled it well, separated the HVT, secured him with zip ties, prepared for extraction. Then the ambush hit. Simulation rounds from the flank. The angle Carson's team had not properly secured because they assumed the threat matched the briefing. Exactly the mistake that killed Aaron. One of Carson's teammates went down. Vest lit up red, not dead, wounded, requiring immediate evacuation. Carson froze for 3 seconds, torn between continuing the mission and helping his wounded teammate. In those 3 seconds, the opposing force AI closed the gap. More simulation rounds. Another teammate hit. Now Carson had 2 wounded and a secured HVT and enemies closing from multiple angles. He made the decision. Grab the HVT, move to extraction, leave the wounded for follow-on teams. Mission first, personnel second. Robert watched Carson's face through the helmet camera feed. Saw the calculation, the cold tactical logic. Leave 2 men to extract 1 HVT. The math made sense from a mission perspective, but it violated the fundamental warrior ethos, no man left behind. The scenario ended with Carson successfully extracting the HVT, but 2 teammates left bleeding in the compound. In real combat, they would have been captured or executed. Robert let the squad sit in the staging area for 10 minutes, processing what just happened. Then he called them to debrief. Carson entered first, face set in stone, defensive, ready to argue that his decision was tactically sound. Robert pointed at 2 empty chairs. Those represent your teammates, the ones you left behind. I want you to look at those chairs while we discuss your decision. Carson's jaw tightened, but he looked at the chairs. Why did you leave them? Sir, the mission was to extract the HVT. I accomplished the mission. Staying to treat casualties would have compromised the extraction and potentially gotten more men killed. I made the tactical decision to prioritize the objective. And if those were real teammates, if they were captured, tortured, executed, while you drove away with your precious HVT, how do you live with that? Carson met his eyes. Sir, with respect, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot tell us mission comes first and then criticize us for prioritizing mission over personnel. What was I supposed to do? Robert walked to the whiteboard. You were supposed to make the impossible choice that combat requires, and then live with the consequences. There is no right answer, Carson, only choices and outcomes. You chose mission over men. Some commanders would call that correct. Others would call it abandonment. I am not here to tell you which it is. Then why are we debriefing this? Carson's voice carried an edge of frustration. What am I supposed to learn if there is no right answer? You are supposed to learn that command is impossible, that you will be placed in situations where every option is terrible and you must choose anyway. That leadership is not about making perfect decisions. It is about making decisions and then owning the consequences without excuse or deflection. Robert turned back to him. In Afghanistan 14 months ago, Lieutenant Jackson Keller faced the same choice you just faced. Extraction going bad. Team pinned down, one operator willing to establish overwatch from an exposed position to cover the extraction. Jackson had to decide. Let that operator take the position, knowing it was extremely dangerous, or delay the extraction and risk the entire mission. He chose to delay, to hesitate, to avoid making the hard call. My son, Lieutenant Aaron Sterling, made the decision for him, disobeyed orders, took the position, saved the squad, died doing it. The room was absolutely silent. Robert continued, you made the opposite choice. You prioritized mission over men. Aaron prioritized men over orders. Both of you faced impossible situations. Neither answer was wrong, but both answers have permanent consequences. Carson, if those had been real teammates, you would spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have saved them. If the extra 2 minutes would have made a difference. If the HVT was worth their lives. That burden is what command costs. He walked to the door, then turned back. You did well today. Tactically sound, decisively executed. But I want you to spend tonight thinking about those empty chairs, about the men you left behind, about whether mission accomplishment is worth the cost of never being trusted by your teammates again. Because that is the choice you made. Dismissed. Carson left looking shaken. The rest of his squad followed in silence. Jackson had watched the entire debrief. Now he approached Robert. Sir, that scenario was designed to mirror Afghanistan. You are using it to make a point about my failure. Robert met his gaze. I am using it to teach the lessons your failure illustrated. There is a difference. Is there? Or are you just torturing me with guilt while pretending it is instruction? Robert stepped closer, kept his voice low. You want to know the truth, Lieutenant? Yes, I am making you watch candidates face the same impossible choice you faced. Yes, I am forcing you to relive the worst moment of your life because you need to understand what happened, not intellectually, emotionally. You need to feel the weight of command, the cost of hesitation, the permanent scar that comes from making the wrong call. Only then can you teach others to avoid your mistakes. Jackson's hands clenched into fists. I already understand. I live with it every day. You do not need to keep punishing me. I am not punishing you. I am training you. When you can watch candidates face impossible choices without flinching, without defending your own decisions, without making excuses, then you will be ready to properly train the next generation. Until then, you are just another officer who got a man killed and learned nothing from it. Robert walked away before Jackson could respond. He needed air, needed distance from the weight of what he was doing. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, colors bleeding across the horizon. Ray found him standing at the edge of the beach. You are destroying that kid. I am rebuilding him. There is a difference. Is there? Because from where I stand, you are using these candidates as weapons against Jackson, making him watch them face the choice that killed Aaron. That is not teaching, Robert. That is revenge. Maybe it is both. Maybe I need revenge and these candidates need teaching, and Jackson needs to face what he did. Maybe all of those things can be true simultaneously. Ray shook his head. You are playing a dangerous game. Mixing personal vendetta with professional instruction, Eventually something will break. Either Jackson will break, or you will break, or these candidates will suffer because you are too focused on settling old scores. Robert turned to face his oldest friend. Then what would you have me do, Ray? Pretend Aaron died for no reason? Pretend Jackson's hesitation was acceptable? Pretend these candidates are prepared for combat when they are not? Tell me what I should do differently. I would have you separate your grief from your teaching. Honor Aaron by training these candidates to be the best operators possible, not by destroying the man you blame for his death. And if destroying that man is the only way to make him a good enough instructor to prevent future deaths, then you are no longer teaching. You are just inflicting pain to ease your own. The two men stood in silence as the sun finished setting. The ocean rolled and crashed, indifferent to their conflict, indifferent to the weight of dead sons and failed commands and the impossible calculus of military service. Finally, Robert spoke. I have 3 weeks left, 3 weeks to teach these candidates their lessons purchased in blood. If Jackson survives my instruction, he will be a better officer. If he does not, he was too weak for this community anyway. And if you destroy him, if he quits or breaks or does something worse, then his father will have his revenge on me for taking him down, and we will all pay the price. But at least these candidates will have learned what they need to survive. Ray did not respond. He walked back toward the compound, leaving Robert alone with the darkening ocean and the accumulated weight of his choices. Twist 5, the one-on-one assessment. Week 4 of Robert's assignment brought individual combat assessments. Each candidate would face 3 separate opponents in controlled fights. First opponent would be their peer. Second would be an instructor with 20 years experience. Third would be Robert Sterling himself. The twist that Robert had not revealed was that each candidate would be assigned a random physical limitation immediately before fighting Robert. They would have 60 seconds to adapt before the match began. The goal was to teach them that physical capacity was less important than tactical intelligence, that an older, injured opponent with superior technique could defeat a younger, stronger opponent who relied on physical attributes. First through was Derek Chen, the candidate who had fumbled the tourniquet in the medical scenario. He had improved dramatically over 3 weeks, become more confident, more decisive. Derek won his first match against another candidate, lost his second match against the experienced instructor, but performed well. Then came time to face Robert. Robert had him draw from the limitation deck. Derek pulled a card and read it aloud. Broken dominant hand. He looked at his right hand. This was his striking hand, his grappling hand, the hand that every technique depended on. Now he had 60 seconds to figure out how to fight without it. Robert watched him process. Saw the moment Derek shifted from panic to problem solving. Saw him start shadowboxing with his left hand, testing range and power, adjusting his stance to protect the injured right side. Time. Robert stepped onto the mat. 3 minutes. Submission or clear dominance. Begin. Derek came in cautious, circling, keeping his injured right hand back, leading with the left, testing Robert's reactions. Robert stayed center mat, utterly still, waiting. At 68 years old, with metal in his spine and arthritis in every joint, he could not afford wasted movement. Every action had to be economical, had to serve multiple purposes. Derek feinted with a left jab. Robert did not react. Derek feinted again. Still nothing. Then Derek committed. A hard left hook aimed at Robert's head. Robert slipped it by millimeters. Let Derek's momentum carry him past. Then Robert closed the distance and took Derek's back, wrapped both arms around his torso in a bear hug. No hooks in, no choke attempt, just controlling the position. Derek tried to turn into him. Could not. His broken right hand meant he could not post or frame effectively. Robert used that limitation, kept Derek's back turned, walked him toward the edge of the mat, then swept Derek's legs and rode him down to the ground. The landing was controlled but decisive. Robert on Derek's back, one arm snaked around his throat, the other arm threading through to lock in a rear naked choke. Perfect position, perfect technique. Derek tapped within seconds. Robert released immediately, helped Derek to his feet. Good adaptation to the limitation. You adjusted your stance and protected the injured hand, but you committed to an attack before properly assessing my positioning. In a real fight, that commitment would have gotten you killed. Learn from it. Derek nodded, face red, breathing hard. Thank you, sir. The assessments continued through the day. Each candidate faced their limitation. Each learned that Robert's age and injuries were less relevant than his 50 years of experience. By the time Jackson's turn came, the sun was setting. Jackson had been assigned to participate as one of the opponent instructors. Now Robert changed the parameters. Lieutenant Keller, you will be facing me in the final assessment. Jackson looked surprised. Sir, I am not a candidate. I am evaluating them. Consider this a training opportunity. You need to experience what they are experiencing. Draw your limitation. Jackson hesitated, then reached into the deck and pulled a card. Vision impairment, left eye covered. He took an eye patch from the medical kit and secured it over his left eye. Now his depth perception was compromised. His peripheral vision reduced. A significant handicap against any opponent. Robert stepped onto the mat. 3 minutes. Same rules. Begin. Jackson moved immediately, not cautious like the candidates, aggressive, trying to establish dominance before Robert could exploit his visual impairment. But Robert had fought opponents with better vision thousands of times. He understood that depth perception was helpful but not essential. That distance could be judged through other cues. That vision was just one input among many. Jackson threw a combination. Fast and technical. Robert slipped the first strike, blocked the second, let the third graze his shoulder while closing distance. Got inside Jackson's reach where the visual impairment mattered less. At close range, Robert was in his element. 50 years of grappling against younger, stronger opponents. He knew every leverage point, every weak angle, every way to make strength irrelevant through superior positioning. He took Jackson down with a simple ankle pick. Nothing fancy, just basic wrestling executed with perfect timing. Jackson hit the mat and immediately tried to stand. Robert prevented it, not through force, through positioning, staying heavy on top, distributing weight to pin Jackson's hips, making it impossible to generate the power needed to escape. 90 seconds gone. Robert transitioned to side control, then to mount. Jackson bucked and bridged, trying to throw him off. Could not. Robert's base was too good, his weight too well distributed. Every attempt Jackson made to escape just burned energy without accomplishing anything. At 2 minutes 30 seconds, Robert transitioned to an armbar, hyperextending Jackson's elbow, applying pressure slowly, giving him every opportunity to tap before damage occurred. Jackson held out for 10 seconds. Pride or stubbornness, or perhaps the need to prove something. Then he tapped. Sharp slaps on Robert's leg. Submission. Robert released instantly. Stood. Offered his hand to help Jackson up. Jackson took it. Face flushed. Breathing hard. Looking at Robert was something that might have been respect or fear or the beginning of understanding. You fought well. Robert kept his voice neutral. Aggressive entry. Good combinations. But you let the visual impairment make you desperate. Made you commit to attacks before setting them up properly. In combat, desperation gets you killed. Better to accept the limitation and work within it than to pretend it does not exist. Jackson nodded, unable to speak through exhaustion and emotion. Robert lowered his voice. 14 months ago in Afghanistan, you had a limitation. You did not know where the enemy was positioned. You did not have complete intelligence. Instead of accepting that limitation and adjusting your tactics, you hesitated, waited for perfect information that was never going to come. Aaron accepted the limitation, made his decision based on incomplete information, acted anyway. That is the difference between you and him. Jackson's face crumpled. His hands shook. For a moment, Robert thought he might break down completely. Then he straightened, drew a shaking breath, nodded. Thank you, sir, for the lesson. He walked off the mat. Ray appeared at Robert's shoulder. That was cruel. That was necessary. Was it? Or did you just need to prove you could beat him? Prove that age and experience matter more than youth and strength? Prove that Aaron learned from you what Jackson never learned from his father? Robert did not answer. He walked off the mat and toward the showers, his back screaming, his hands trembling from adrenaline and exertion, his body reminding him that he was 68 years old and had just fought 6 matches in one day. But the lessons had been taught. The candidates had learned that limitation was not the same as inability, that adaptation mattered more than capacity, that an operator's value was not measured in physical strength, but in tactical intelligence and refusal to quit. And Jackson had learned something else, had been forced to confront his own limitations, his own failures. The permanent cost of decisions made in the fog of war. Whether that lesson would save future lives or simply destroy one more officer who already carried too much guilt was something only time would reveal. Robert stood under hot water, letting it ease the ache in his back. 3 weeks remained. 3 weeks to complete the training, to reduce the attrition rate, to honor Aaron's memory by preventing other deaths. 3 weeks to discover whether an old warrior teaching hard lessons could find redemption through service, or whether some wounds were simply too deep to heal. The water ran cold before he finished. He dried off and dressed slowly, every movement a reminder of age and damage and the permanent cost of 3 decades in naval special warfare. Outside, the base was quiet. Candidates secured in barracks. Instructors finished for the day. The ocean rolling and crashing in the darkness beyond the compound. Robert walked to his quarters. Inside, Ray was already asleep, soft snoring from the other bed, the sound of a man who could still find peace despite the weight of memories. Robert lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come for hours. It never did anymore. His mind too active, too many ghosts demanding attention. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to Aaron's photo, the 10-year-old boy who wanted to be like his father, who had no idea what that would cost, who paid the price anyway because he inherited his father's stubborn refusal to quit even when quitting was the smart choice. "I am trying, son," Robert whispered to the photograph, "trying to make your death mean something, trying to teach these kids the lessons you died proving, trying to make sure no other father buries his son because a squad leader was not properly trained." The photo did not answer. Aaron remained frozen at 10 years old, forever young, forever determined, forever believing that being like his father was worth any cost. Robert put the phone away and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, new opportunities to transform grief into teaching and pain into prevention. He fell asleep still in his clothes, dreaming of fire-based tango in Afghanistan and all the places where warriors learned that courage was necessary but not sufficient, that sometimes you did everything right and still lost, that the only unforgivable sin was letting those deaths be meaningless. Robert Sterling intended to give Aaron's death meaning, whatever it cost him, whatever it cost anyone. The final week began with silence. Week 15 of Bud's Class 347, Week 6 of Robert Sterling's assignment. Not the comfortable silence of peace, the heavy silence that follows revelation, the kind that settles over warriors who have seen behind the curtain and understand now what the cost of their profession truly means. Robert Sterling stood in the briefing room watching 37 candidates file in for morning formation. 3 weeks ago, these men had been confident, cocky even, certain that youth and strength and aggressive tactics would carry them through any challenge. Now they moved differently, more deliberate, less wasteful of energy. They had learned through brutal repetition that speed without purpose was just panic, that strength without technique was liability, that confidence without competence got people killed. Lieutenant Jackson Keller called the room to attention. His voice was different too, less certain, more measured. The edges of arrogance worn smooth by 3 weeks of watching candidates face the same impossible choices he had faced in Afghanistan. Robert walked to the front. Behind him on the screen was a single image, a photograph of a SEAL team, 12 men in combat gear standing in front of a helicopter, faces obscured by tactical equipment, location classified, date redacted. This photo was taken 19 months ago in Afghanistan. The team you see here was conducting high-value target operations in Helmand Province. All 12 operators were experienced, and all were physically fit, and all they had completed multiple deployments. They understood their boss, trusted their training, believed they were prepared for whatever combat might bring. He let that settle, then continued. 6 weeks after this photo was taken, one of these operators was killed during a mission that went wrong, not because he lacked skill, not because he was unprepared, but because his squad leader hesitated at a critical moment. And when leaders hesitate, warriors die. Robert pointed at one figure in the photograph. Second from right, that is Lieutenant Aaron Sterling, my son. He died establishing Overwatch to cover his squad's extraction when the original plan failed and his squad leader could not adapt quickly enough. Complete silence. The candidates had known Robert's son died in Afghanistan. They had not seen his face, had not understood he was their age. One of them, a warrior who did everything right and died anyway. The squad leader who hesitated is now one of your instructors. Lieutenant Jackson Keller learned hard lessons that day. Lessons that cost my son his life. For the past 5 weeks, I have been teaching you those same lessons, making sure none of you repeat his mistakes, making sure no other father buries his son because a leader was not prepared for the weight of command. Robert turned to face Jackson directly. Lieutenant Keller, front and center. Jackson walked forward, face pale but composed. He stood at attention beside Robert facing the candidates. Robert's voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. Lieutenant, tell them what happened. Jackson took a shaking breath, then spoke. Mission was HVT extraction. Intelligence suggested light opposition. We breached the compound and secured the target. During exfil, we were ambushed from an unexpected angle. My plan had not properly covered that approach. Lieutenant Sterling identified the threat and volunteered to establish overwatch from an exposed position. I hesitated, told him to wait for quick reaction force. He said there was no time, asked for permission. I said negative. He disobeyed and took the position anyway. Provided covering fire that saved 6 lives, including mine. Was killed by RPG before he could withdraw. Jackson's voice cracked on the last sentence, but he continued. I hesitated because I wanted perfect information. Wanted to be certain the risk was justified. Lieutenant Sterling understood that in combat you never have perfect information. You assess, decide, act. My hesitation would have gotten the entire squad killed. His actions saved us. I have lived with that knowledge every day since. Have tried to understand why I froze when decision was required. Have tried to become a better officer so no one else dies because I am not prepared for the weight of command. Robert let the words hang, then spoke to the room. Every person in this room will face command decisions, moments where you must choose between terrible options with incomplete information and no time to deliberate. Some of you will choose correctly, some will choose wrong, some will hesitate like Lieutenant Keller and let others make the choice for you. But all of you will live with the consequences. The dead teammates, the failed missions. The weight of knowing your decisions have permanent costs. He walked to Jackson, put a hand on his shoulder. For 5 weeks, I have been hard on this officer, forced him to relive his worst moment, made him watch you face the same impossible choices. Some of you probably think I was cruel, that I was punishing him for my son's death. You are partially correct, but cruelty with purpose is called training. And Lieutenant Keller needed this training more than any of you, because he will train hundreds of candidates after you graduate, will be responsible for preparing them for the same chaos that killed Aaron. If my harshness makes him a better instructor and prevents future deaths, then it was worth the cost. Jackson's eyes were wet, but he did not look away, did not flinch from the weight of what Robert was saying. Robert addressed the room again. Lieutenant Keller made a mistake. Aaron paid for it. But Jackson is not the villain of this story. He is just a warrior who learned an impossible lesson the hardest way possible. Like all of you will learn impossible lessons if you survive long enough. The question is not whether you will make mistakes, you will. The question is whether you learn from them or let them destroy you. Twist 6, the report was a lie. Robert turned back to Jackson. Now, Lieutenant, tell them the rest. Tell them what the official after-action report said. Jackson's face went white. Sir, that information is classified. I had the classification removed. Tell them. Jackson swallowed hard. The official after-action report stated that Lieutenant Sterling disobeyed direct orders and established Overwatch without authorization. That his actions, while heroic, violated protocol. That the mission would have succeeded without his intervention if proper procedures had been followed. And why did the report say that? Because I wrote it that way, to cover my hesitation, to make it seem like Aaron's death was result of his recklessness instead of my failure. I blamed him to protect my career. The room erupted, candidates standing, shouting, calling Jackson a coward, a liar, demanding he be removed from the instructor cadre. The noise was deafening. Robert raised his hand. Silence returned. He turned to Jackson. When did you realize the report was wrong? The day we buried him. When I saw you standing at the grave, when I understood that my lies had not just cost Aaron his life, but had denied you the truth about how he died, about how brave he was, how right he was to disobey my order. I tried to tell you at the funeral. You walked away. I have been trying to find the courage to face you ever since. And now you have. Robert's voice was gentle, in front of 37 witnesses, with no protection from your father or the chain of command. That takes courage, Lieutenant, a different kind than combat courage, but courage nonetheless. Robert turned to the candidates. Lieutenant Keller will remain as your instructor. He will train you using the lessons he learned from his failure. Because warriors who have faced catastrophic mistakes and emerged wiser are more valuable than warriors who have never been tested. Aaron's death was not in vain if it teaches Jackson to be the leader he should have been, if it prevents future failures, if it saves future lives. He walked to the door, then turned back one final time. You have 1 week remaining, 7 days to prove you learned what I came here to teach. That physical capacity is temporary. Technical skill is permanent. That leadership means making impossible choices and living with the consequences. That the only unforgivable sin is not learning from your mistakes. Class dismissed. The candidates filed out in stunned silence. Jackson remained standing at the front, tears streaming down his face. Not moving, not speaking, just standing with the weight of his confession. Robert approached him. Lieutenant, you did well. Jackson looked at him with raw pain. I destroyed Aaron's reputation to save my own career. I lied about how he died. How can you forgive that? I cannot. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can acknowledge that you faced what you did here, in front of people who will judge you. That takes strength I was not certain you possessed. What happens now? Now you become the instructor Aaron would have wanted training these candidates. You teach them what you learn. You make sure his death has meaning. That is the only redemption available to you. Jackson nodded, unable to speak. Robert walked out, found Ray waiting in the corridor. That was either the best piece of instruction I have ever witnessed or the cruelest manipulation. I cannot decide which. Robert leaned against the wall, exhaustion hitting him like physical weight. It was both. I needed Jackson to confess, needed him to own what he did, but I also needed the candidates to understand that mistakes do not define you. Learning from mistakes defines you. If Jackson can become a better officer after this, then Aaron's death means something. And if Jackson cannot recover, if this breaks him permanently, then he was already broken. I just exposed it. Better it happens here than during his next deployment when he gets more people killed. They walked outside. The California sun was bright and warm, ocean sparkling in the distance. The compound alive with activity as training continued. Master Chief Raymond Cross had been Robert's friend for 50 years, had stood beside him through every nightmare, had earned the right to speak truth. Robert, you are playing God with these men's lives, deciding who learns and who breaks, who deserves redemption and who deserves punishment. That is not teaching. That is something else entirely. What would you have me do differently? Except that Aaron is dead, that Jackson made a mistake, that no amount of harsh instruction will bring your son back or heal your grief. Teach these candidates because teaching is honorable work, not because it gives you power over the man you blame for Aaron's death. Robert turned to face his oldest friend. You think I am here for revenge? I think you came here with good intentions, but somewhere along the way, revenge became the primary motivation. You are not training Jackson, you are punishing him, and using these candidates as weapons in that punishment. Robert had no answer, because Ray was right. The past 5 weeks had been about more than training, had been about making Jackson suffer, about forcing him to face what he did, about extracting confession and inflicting the maximum emotional damage possible while calling it instruction. But did that make it wrong? If the methods were harsh but the results were effective? If candidates learned and Jackson became a better officer and future deaths were prevented? Ray seemed to read his thoughts. The ends do not justify the means, Robert. Not when the means involve psychological torture. Not when you are operating from grief instead of wisdom. I came here to honor Aaron. You came here to make someone pay for Aaron. There is a difference. Robert did not respond. He walked away, toward the beach, needed to be alone with the ocean and his thoughts and the growing realization that Ray might be correct. The final week brought the exercise that would define everything. Operation Last Stand. Robert had designed the ultimate test, a 48-hour continuous evolution that combined every lesson from the previous 5 weeks. The candidates would conduct a raid on a defended compound, extract a high-value target, treat casualties under fire, adapt to physical limitations, make impossible choices, and do it all while exhausted, cold, hungry, and operating on minimal sleep. The scenario was designed to break them, to push them past every limit they thought they had, to discover whether the lessons had taken root or whether they would revert to panic and poor decisions under maximum stress. Dawn on Monday. 37 candidates stood in full combat gear. Each had been assigned a random physical limitation for the duration of the exercise. Broken arms, restricted vision, reduced mobility. They would have to complete the entire 48-hour evolution while managing these handicaps. Robert briefed them from the command center. Your objective is compound Alpha 7 kilometers north of this position. Inside is a high-value target designated as Viper 1. You will conduct planning, movement to target, assault, and extraction. Enemy force is numerically superior and will not follow predictable patterns. Medical casualties will occur. Equipment will fail. Your plans will not survive contact. You will be forced to adapt continuously for 48 hours. There is no safety net, no pause button, no instructors to save you when things go wrong, only your training and your refusal to quit. He let that sink in, then delivered the final piece. One additional element. At some point during this exercise, each squad will face a scenario where mission success requires sacrificing personnel. Leaving wounded behind, prioritizing objective over teammates, you will have to make that choice, and you will have to live with the consequences. Questions? Carson Blake raised his hand. Sir, what defines success, extracting the HVT or bringing everyone home? Robert smiled without humor. Success is defined by you, by what you decide matters most. Mission or men, objective or brotherhood. There is no right answer, only the answer you choose and whether you can live with it afterward. The candidates moved out, 6 squads of 6 men each, spreading into the training area that had been transformed into hostile territory. Robert watched from the command center. Multiple screens showing helmet camera feeds, radio chatter filling the room, the controlled chaos of combat unfolding in real time. Alpha Squad, led by Carson Blake, moved fastest. Aggressive tactics, good formations. They reached the compound first, breached with textbook precision, found the HVT, secured him. Then the scenario turned. Enemy reinforcements. Heavy fire from unexpected angles. 2 of Carson's men went down, wounded, requiring immediate evacuation. Carson faced the choice: extract the HVT and leave the wounded, or delay extraction to treat casualties and risk losing the target. Robert watched Carson's face through the helmet camera, saw the calculation, the terrible math of command. Then Carson made his decision. We are not leaving anyone. Marcus, grab the HVT. Derek, help me with the casualties. We move together or not at all. It was the opposite choice from 3 weeks ago. Then Carson had prioritized mission over men. Now he prioritized men over mission. The extraction took 8 minutes instead of 2, long enough that the enemy force nearly overran their position. But they made it. HVT secured. All team members accounted for. Mission accomplished without abandoning wounded. Robert keyed his microphone. Alpha Squad, halt at checkpoint Bravo. I need to speak with your squad leader. Carson approached the checkpoint breathing hard, face covered in dirt and sweat. Yes, sir. You delayed extraction to treat casualties. That decision nearly cost you the entire mission. Why? Carson met his eyes. Because last time I prioritized mission over men. Completed the objective but lost my team's trust. This time I decided trust matters more than mission success. If we all go home together, we can try again tomorrow. If I leave men behind, I lose them permanently. And if the enemy had overrun your position during that delay, if the HVT had been killed, if your decision to save 2 men cost 6 lives instead, then I would have made the wrong choice, sir, but at least I would have made it for the right reasons. Mission success means nothing if my teammates cannot trust me to protect them. Robert nodded slowly. Good answer, Carson. You learned the lesson. Now get back in the fight. 40 hours remaining. The exercise continued through Monday night and into Tuesday. Candidates pushed past exhaustion, past pain, past the point where rational thought became difficult and training had to take over. Squad after squad faced their impossible choice. Some prioritized mission. Some prioritized personnel. None of the choices were wrong. All of them had costs. By Tuesday afternoon, 34 candidates remained in the fight. 3 had been medically removed after real injuries occurred during the chaos. Sprained ankles, dislocated shoulder, 1 concussion from a fall. Nothing career-ending, but enough to take them out of the exercise. Robert made note of their names. They would receive their tridents at graduation despite not completing the final evolution. They had proven themselves over 14 weeks. One failed exercise did not erase that. The final phase began at sunset Tuesday. The squads had to extract through a defended corridor while protecting their HVT and managing their wounded. The scenario was designed to be impossible. Too many enemies, too little ammunition, too many casualties requiring too many people to carry them. Something would have to be sacrificed. Personnel or mission. There was no way to save both. Robert watched from the command center as the squads attempted the extraction. Most made the tactical decision to leave their wounded in covered positions with radio contact, promised to send help once the HVT was extracted. Mission first, personnel second. But one squad made a different choice. Bravo Squad, led by Derek Chen, the young man who had fumbled the tourniquet 5 weeks ago, who had learned through brutal repetition that technical skill saved lives. Derek's squad had 3 wounded, no way to carry them all and maintain tactical movement. The enemy force was closing. Time was running out. Derek made his call. We are not leaving them. Everyone drops combat load except weapons and ammunition. We carry our wounded, move as one unit, fight our way through. It was tactically insane. Dropping gear meant losing capability. Carrying wounded meant moving slow. Fighting as a single unit meant presenting a concentrated target. But Derek understood something the others had not grasped. The scenario was not about tactical success. It was about values, about what you were willing to sacrifice and what you refused to lose. His squad moved together, slow but coordinated. When enemy fire came, they did not scatter. They formed a protective circle around their wounded. Returned fire with disciplined bursts, advanced by bounds, covered each other. It took them 40 minutes to complete an extraction that should have taken 5. They lost the HVT during the chaos. A simulation round hit him. He was designated killed in action. Mission failure. By any tactical measure, Derek's squad had failed. But when they emerged from the training area carrying their wounded teammates, something in their bearings suggested they did not feel like failures. They looked like warriors who had chosen brotherhood over objectives, who had decided some things mattered more than mission success. Robert met them at the extraction point. Bravo Squad, why did you lose the HVT? Derek set down the wounded teammate he had been carrying. Because we prioritize personnel over mission, sir. We chose to bring our teammates home instead of completing the objective. And you consider that success? Derek looked at the 5 men standing beside him, exhausted, covered in dirt, but together. Yes, sir, we all came home. That is success. Robert studied them for a long moment, then nodded. You are correct. The mission was not to extract the HVT. The mission was to discover what you value, whether you can be trusted, whether you understand that operators are not expendable resources to be sacrificed for objectives. You passed, all of you. He turned to address all the squads gathered at the extraction point, 34 exhausted candidates. Every one of them had survived 48 hours of continuous operations. Everyone had faced impossible choices. Everyone had proven they possessed the fundamental quality that no training could create. Refusal to quit. For 6 weeks I have pushed you beyond what you thought possible, made you fight while injured, forced you to adapt to constant uncertainty, made you choose between terrible options with no right answers. Some of you hated me for it. That is fine. I was not here to be liked. I was here to prepare you for combat, to teach you the lessons my son learned the hardest way possible. Robert paused. Let them see his face, the lines and scars and weight of 32 years. Lieutenant Aaron Sterling died in Afghanistan because his squad leader was not prepared for the weight of command, because training had taught him to expect predictability in an unpredictable world, because no one had forced him to face impossible choices before combat forced that choice on him. I came here to make sure none of you repeat that failure, to make sure no other father buries his son because a leader was not properly trained. He looked at each of them. You are ready, not because you are physically capable, not because you memorize tactics, but because you have learned that effectiveness as an operator is not about your body. It is about your mind, your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to function when everything hurts and quitting would be easier and survival requires thinking instead of just reacting. Robert stepped back. Operation Last Stand is complete. You have 72 hours until graduation. Use that time to rest, to recover, and to understand what you accomplished here. Dismissed. The candidates did not move immediately. They stood looking at him, at each other, at Lieutenant Jackson Keller, who stood silently at the edge of the group. Some nodded, some saluted. Then they filed out, heading toward barracks and hot showers and the first real sleep in 48 hours. Jackson approached Robert. "Sir, what you did these past 6 weeks, what you put them through, what you put me through, I understand now. Not intellectually, emotionally, I understand why Aaron made the choice he made, why hesitation is unforgivable, why leadership means accepting the weight of decisions that have permanent costs." Robert studied him. "And what will you do with that understanding?" "I will teach it. To every candidate who comes through here, I will make sure they face the impossible choices I was not prepared for. I will honor Aaron by becoming the instructor he deserved to learn from." "That is all I can ask." Jackson hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Sir, I know you cannot forgive me, but I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my career trying to earn something like forgiveness. Not from you, from Aaron's memory." Robert put a hand on his shoulder. "That is the only redemption available to you, Lieutenant. Make it count." Jackson nodded, then walked away to help candidates secure equipment and prepare for the final days before graduation. Ray appeared at Robert's elbow. "You did it. Reduced attrition. Taught them lessons they needed. Made Jackson face his failures. Honored Aaron's memory. Everything you came here to do." Robert felt the weight of 6 weeks settling on him like physical mass. His back screamed, his hands trembled. His body reminded him he was 68 years old and had pushed himself harder than he had in a decade. But it was finished. So why does it not feel like enough? Because grief does not have a finish line. Ray's voice was gentle. "You thought that if you came here and taught these kids and made Jackson suffer and prevented future deaths, somehow that would make Aaron's death acceptable. But loss does not work that way. It just sits there, permanent, and all you can do is learn to carry it." Robert closed his eyes. "I miss him, Ray. Every single day. I wake up and for a moment I forget he is gone. Then I remember, and I have to learn it all over again." "I know," Ray gripped his shoulder, "but you honored him here. Those 34 candidates are alive and better trained because you came back. That has to mean something." "It means something." Robert opened his eyes. "It just does not mean enough." They stood in silence as the sun set over the Pacific, the same ocean that had tested them 50 years ago, the same ocean that would test new warriors long after they were gone. Graduation day arrived with California sunshine and families filling the stands. 34 candidates stood in dress blues, tridents pinned to their uniforms, faces showing pride and exhaustion and the understanding that they had earned something precious. Admiral Thomas Keller presided over the ceremony. 66 years old, 4 stars gleaming, face lined but strong. He spoke about sacrifice and service and the SEAL ethos, about warriors who had gone before and those who would come after. Then he called Robert Sterling to the podium. Robert walked slowly. Let everyone see his limp. Let them understand what 32 years looked like. He stood at the microphone and looked out at the 34 graduates. "I am not going to give you advice. You have heard enough advice these past 6 weeks. Instead, I am going to tell you what I wish someone had told my son before he deployed to Afghanistan." He paused. "Let the words carry weight. You are going into combat, real combat where people die and missions fail and good decisions still lead to bad outcomes. Some of you will make mistakes. Some will face impossible choices. Some will hesitate when decisiveness is required. That is human. That is normal. But what matters is what you do after the mistake, whether you learn from it, whether you let it make you better or whether you let it destroy you." Robert looked at Jackson, standing at attention with the other instructors. "My son died covering for a squad leader's mistake. That squad leader is now one of your instructors. For 6 weeks, I've been harsh with him, forced him to face what he did, made him watch you struggle with the same choices. Some of you probably think I was cruel. You are correct. I was cruel. But cruelty with purpose is called teaching. And I came to teach his squad leader those same lessons, to hold him accountable for the mistake that cost Aaron his life. For 6 weeks, I've been harsh, unforgiving. Some would say cruel. But Lieutenant Keller needed that instruction, needed to face what he did, needed to understand the permanent cost of hesitation so he could teach future warriors to avoid repeating his errors." Robert's voice softened. "But here is what I learned in 6 weeks. Jackson Keller is not the villain of Aaron's story. He is just a warrior who made a mistake and is trying to learn from it. Like all of us. Like you will when you make your mistakes. The question is not whether you fail. You will. The question is whether you have the courage to face your failure and learn from it and become better because of it. He looked back at his graduates. Aaron would have been proud to serve with you, every one of you, because you have learned what he learned. That toughness is not about physical capacity, that leadership means making impossible choices, that the only unforgivable sin is not learning from your mistakes. Go forth and serve well. Honor the warriors who died teaching us these lessons. And when you face your own impossible moments, remember what you learned here. He stepped back from the podium. The families erupted in applause. The graduates stood at attention, tridents gleaming, the beginning of their careers as naval special warfare operators. Robert left the stage and walked to the beach, found a quiet spot away from the ceremony. Ray found him there 10 minutes later. That was a good speech. It was the truth. That is all I had left to give them. What happens now? Ray asked. You go back to Montana? Back to training horses? Robert looked out at the Pacific. Same ocean, same waves, different day. I do not know. Montana feels empty now, like I left something behind here. Maybe you did. Maybe you left the grief. Found some kind of peace through teaching. Robert shook his head. The grief is still there. But maybe Ray was right. Maybe it felt different now. Less like an open wound, more like an old scar, still visible, still painful sometimes, but not bleeding anymore. 6 months later, Montana. Robert Sterling stood in his training pen watching a young gelding test the lead rope. Same pattern, same lesson. The patient accumulation of skills transforming wild animal into something that could carry weight without breaking. His phone buzzed. He checked it. Email from Lieutenant Jackson Keller. Sir, I wanted you to know that Class 351 just graduated, 39 candidates, only 12% attrition, the lowest rate in 5 years. I trained them using the methods you taught me, made them face impossible choices, forced them to adapt to uncertainty, taught them the lessons Aaron died proving. One of the graduates is Derek Chen's younger brother. He told me Derek deployed to Syria 3 months ago. His team was ambushed during a building clear. Enemy appeared from an unexpected angle. Derek adapted immediately, established suppressive fire, covered his squad's withdrawal, saved 7 lives, 0 casualties. Derek credits his survival to the training you gave us, to learning that combat does not follow scripts, that adaptation matters more than plans, that warriors who have faced catastrophic scenarios in training are prepared for chaos in combat. I wanted you to know that your son's death is saving lives, that the lessons you taught are being passed on, that Aaron's legacy is alive in every graduate who trains here. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it, but I am trying to honor his memory the only way I know how, by being the instructor he deserved to have. Respectfully, Jackson Keller, Lieutenant, U.S. Navy. Robert read the email twice, then looked at the photograph on his phone. Aaron at age 10, oversized PT gear, face full of determination. I think it worked, son, Robert whispered to the image. I think we made your death mean something. He put the phone away and returned to the horse. The gelding had stopped testing the rope, stood quiet now, having learned the lesson. That resistance was pointless when the human understood leverage better than you did. Robert smiled. Same lesson he had learned 50 years ago. Same lesson he had taught for 6 weeks at Coronado. The patient accumulation of wisdom transforming chaos into order, wild energy into controlled power, fear into function. That night, Robert slept without nightmares for the first time in 14 months. He dreamed of Aaron, not dying in Afghanistan, but graduating buds, face full of pride as the trident was pinned to his uniform. Catherine beside Robert in the stands, both of them watching their son become the warrior he wanted to be. In the dream, Aaron looked at him and smiled, then spoke words Robert had not heard in years. Thanks, Dad, for teaching me what matters. Robert woke at dawn, Montana sky turning pink and gold, mountains rising against the horizon, the ranch quiet and peaceful. He walked outside and looked at the training pen where the gelding rested, having learned its lessons. Ready for the next phase. Same as the candidates at Coronado, lessons learned, ready to serve, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of warriors who came before. Aaron's death had taught Jackson. Jackson had taught Class 347, Those graduates were now teaching new operators in the fleet, the lessons spreading outward like ripples in water. Each generation learning from the mistakes of the previous, each death prevented by the knowledge purchased with previous deaths. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was what Robert had, the only redemption available, the only way to honor his son. He thought about the letter in his desk, the one from Admiral Keller asking if he would consider returning for another class, another 6 weeks, another opportunity to teach lessons written in blood. Robert had not decided yet. His body hurt constantly now. 6 weeks at Coronado had accelerated damage that was already extensive. His back would never fully recover. His hands trembled more than before. He was 68 years old and felt 80. But there were more classes, more candidates who needed to learn, more potential squad leaders who might hesitate at critical moments, more fathers who might receive chaplain visits if someone did not teach their sons the lessons that kept warriors alive. Maybe one more class, one more opportunity to honor Aaron, one more chance to transform grief into prevention. Robert walked to his truck. In the back was his garment bag, dress blues inside, trident pinned to the uniform, ribbons telling stories of survival and sacrifice, the physical evidence of 32 years spent serving. He did not know if he would wear it again, but it was there, ready, just in case the phone rang and someone needed an old warrior who understood that toughness was not about physical capacity, that wisdom was more valuable than strength, that warriors who had faced catastrophic mistakes and emerged wiser were more valuable than warriors who had never been tested. The phone did not ring that day, or the next, but Robert was ready, because the only unforgivable sin was not learning from your mistakes. And Robert Sterling had spent a lifetime learning, teaching, passing forward the hard-won lessons that kept warriors alive. Aaron's legacy would continue, through Jackson, through the candidates, through every warrior who learned that combat did not follow scripts, that adaptation saved lives, that the only thing that mattered was refusing to quit when everything hurt, and survival required thinking instead of just reacting. The old warrior could rest now, not from service. Warriors never truly rested, but from grief, from the crushing weight of loss that had defined every moment since that chaplain appeared at his Montana door. Aaron was gone. That would never change. But his death had meaning, had saved lives, would continue saving lives long after Robert was gone. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was what he had. And sometimes in the Montana dawn, with mountains rising against the sky and horses moving quietly in their pens and the world peaceful and still, Robert Sterling could almost believe it was enough. Almost.